And we're going just like that. So, Dave, thank you for taking the time to record this episode. I think we've been talking about it for 2 or 3 months now.
Yeah.
And initially, the idea to have you on the show came from just the tremendous amount of value that you always bring to our Forge Ferocity meetings. And you're very passionate. You're very articulate. You have a strong set of morals and values that you preach and you stand behind. And those are the type of people I like to sit down and talk with. But also, equally as important to that, you're not just someone that talks the talk, you walk the walk. And I'm sure we'll get into all that. You know, right before we started recording, you were saying that you were 50 pounds overweight before you decided to get on the path and turn your life around and start practicing what you preach and being that role model for your boys. And now you're that person. And it's fucking awesome, man. I love meeting people that have been on the path. And I always say, man, it's easy if I shouldn't say easy, but if you've always been on the path and you maintain it. Like, I've had some type of physicality or athletic endeavor in my life pretty much my whole life. I've never fully fallen off the path, but when you see people that fell off it and then decided to get back on, I think that's an inspirational story that people need to hear. So I'd like to get into that as well. But before we go into all the details, you know how I do the show. I just like to sit down and have a conversation, talk about who you are, where you're from, what brought you here, and then we're just gonna have fun with it, bro.
All right. Yeah. Well, first of all, Greg, I really appreciate the invite. Sincerely, as far as people I look up to, people I respect, and we'll get into that, how that respect has grown over the years. For you, just happiness for where your life and path is going, and this weekend was a shining example of that. I am so Dave Barton from Minnesota. So I came out here. It would have been quite a haul by vehicle. So I had to fly out here. So that's the mileage to put into perspective.
Yeah.
And maybe next time, Lou, who attended camp, talked about maybe driving to Minnesota, and then Lou and I would just drive out here to Washington and maybe find some other Forge Ferocity members on the way.
And just make it a road trip, huh?
Just make it a road trip.
How cool would that be?
Yeah.
Well, and that was one of the coolest aspects of this camp, is that we all connected via Forge Ferocity. And then was there 10 or 11 of us that are part of that program that decided to attend this Guns and Gis?
Yeah.
So it's, on one hand, it's kind of Guns and Gis. On another hand, it's kind of Forge Ferocity. And it all blended together perfectly, man.
Yeah, it was divine. Cause there was talk with the Guns and Gis schedule about having a Provo date, and my son, actually, my oldest son, Carter, who's an awesome young man, he graduated from the University of Utah last year, and so he'd been in the Utah area, and I was like, "Oh, Guns and Gis is going to be in Utah," and that's my destination.
Okay.
Because I'd been out to Washington a few times, and I don't get to travel much, and so I went to check out Provo and Fieldcraft and see what Mike Glover's got going out there. And
yeah.
I think maybe that's down the road someday, but having that kind of not culminate and then just really getting to know the Forge group and saying so many of them are from Washington, and we could meet up and put kind of a face and get off the Zoom call and face to face and meet up. It was a no brainer.
Yeah.
Jumped in. And then I think Jordan had mentioned that also attended from Forge Ferocity that, well, once you were in, I was in, and then it kind of just snowballed from there.
Nice.
And then, then I think we had the 11 or 12 from the group that attended. And
what was fascinating about that was a Zoom call. Like I always say, like, connecting with people over any type of electronic platform doesn't have the same level of connection as when you're sitting around a bonfire like we were, right? But I honestly felt like every single person that showed up, I already knew you. You're already my friend. We already have a connection. And then we just built off it from there. And I think that was the vibe felt by everybody. I mean, the fact that they were here kind of proves that's the case. They were willing to dedicate a weekend and fly out here and spend time and money to be able to share this experience with a group of people that they've bonded with through Zoom. And it just kind of shows the power of technology. Because on one hand, it's like we always bitch about technology, right? but there's also some pretty powerful silver linings. And watching that group of people come together, and obviously I was running the camp all weekend and behind the scenes, a lot of logistic stuff. So I didn't get to be as immersed as you guys with the Forge Ferocity side of it, but all the pictures and hanging out and the Airbnb and like it was a really cool thing to see everybody come together.
Yeah, we got quite a few pictures and videos, from the weekend, and I mentioned to everybody that I downloaded every single one. And sometimes you only download, you're like, oh, is this a duplicate?
Yeah.
And I said, not only did I download every single one, I'm going to get home and my family's going to have to look at every single one. Here's that picture again, but it was a great time. And here's a new story about that picture. With Forge Ferocity, I mean, to get into that right away, because I think we'll talk about the importance of, finding a group, finding someone to talk to, getting out of your own head, and kind of having someone to share your story with. I'm thinking about more and more like where the name came from, but the idea of forging. You start with something, and that group, we always joke, if we try to explain like, what the group is all about, like none of us can. I don't think any of us would explain it the exact same way.
I agree, including myself. You know?
Yeah. And then what is it? And but I think about like the word forge, and I think that it gets started with something. Like there's some substance or start that you then forge into something. You shape it.
Yeah.
You put time into it, and then it culminates into something, or it kind of grows into something better, or is formed into something better. And I think we've started to figure out like one thing that the group started with was truth, because what the group has is a lot of people who are really focused on self-assessment. They want to get better. Mm-hmm. They want belonging, and they want to be around other people who seek that out in their lifestyles. And the group runs the gamut from people who are getting onto that path, first couple steps, or they're even looking for where to take the first step, to people who have really achieved quite a bit.
Yeah.
And I think that where that started from, or if you want to say the substance that it started from, is what you offered up, Greg. You set the example because you have to have somewhere to start from, and who's leading this. So you were the draw. You drew everybody in. If it was just Forge Ferocity, some online with like no personality behind it, or no start, or no draw, how would that even work?
It wouldn't attract people.
Yeah.
People want to know there's somebody behind this that actually they believe has value, for sure, man.
Yeah. And, we joked a little bit this weekend and kind of talked about on one of the Zoom calls about, who you are, and kind of, where you came, that, as we like to call it, internet celebrity. Yeah. Right. But it was through COVID. It was through standing up for what you believe in. More importantly, forget about whatever the cause of it was. Your action really brought you to the forefront, to a lot of people's eyes and ears in a time when people needed that. And we've talked about that was the draw, and that was very important. But you didn't stay stagnant, and that's why I'm sitting here today. That's why I came out to Washington. That's why I think Forge Ferocity is becoming successful, is because you kind of laid that groundwork of not just being Greg Anderson in his patrol car, standing up for something. You then put actions behind words. You poured into your academy. You poured into your family. You poured into people around you. You chose to build them up, and that stance that you took was a point of truth, not of your truth, or of wanting to be seen or wanting to be heard, but it was a decisive action, and it was the truth. And I think that's something that was very attractive to me about that, because when we were all hearing different things, conflicting messages, state to state, from the government or from our friends, falling on different sides of things, you start to look around for the truth, and it's really hard to find. And so I think that was what you started with. But, again, why I came out to Guns and Gis is a couple things. I've really been amazingly proud of the man that you're becoming, because you're focusing on health. You're focusing on your mind. You're going beyond just the guy that took a stance about one thing. And then you're living it, and you're living those actions, and it's contagious. So we got out to Electric North, and it's surreal when you get out here, because when you're not from Washington and you don't come out to the gym, you hear about it and you see the Instagram pictures, and you get, okay, this is a culture, and this is a really cool culture, because then you compare it to your gyms at home, or you compare it to your friends groups or whatever it might be, and you're like, they got something different. And then you get out here, and it almost hangs in the air. People have a smile. People look like they're achieving. You can tell they're on the path, and it's you started it, but it now has gone beyond you.
Yes, and I say that often, and I'm proud of that, because I don't want this place to be about Greg Anderson. I want it to be a place where everybody can come and feel that energy, and then pour into it, but also receive it as well. And I love that you said that, because people say it to me often. They're like, man, I walk in this door and there's an energy to this place. Eben talked about that. He's like, there's something going on in here that is attractive to me. He came to one practice last week, on a week ago today. He came to Monday night practice, and because of the vibe that he felt, they said, we have to stay. We have to stay this weekend and experience this with these people. And it's, I'm super proud of that, because on one hand, I know that it's not about me, but on the other hand, I played a very integral role of setting the foundation and building the facility and kind of building a culture in a capacity that I thought would be beneficial. And here we are 10 years later, and a lot of people are driving a lot of power from this place. And Guns and Gis gets to have kind of a front row seat to that, not only with the program that you're doing, but you see, I keep the academy open for my students with the other mat room. You saw a lot of people coming in and out. You saw families coming in and out. And it's I do that for, obviously the main reason is I want to keep our clients and our teammates that are here happy. I don't want to, hey, the gym shut down this weekend, But it's also cool for the Guns and Gis students to kind of be a little more immersed in the overall culture. And you see all the CrossFitters out there doing their thing and stuff. And it was fun for you guys to get to really feel that vibe and feel that energy.
Yeah. Yeah. And you mentioned Eben, who ran all our breathing exercises before the range days, started up for Guns and Gis. And it's a great example, because, why were him and Kat here? Why did they choose to stay? Why did they participate? What drew them here? I mean, you almost use that word, drew them here. It's not like they even chose to be here. It's kind of, I really believe that it kind of all culminated for a reason, because that was a huge value add. There was a lot of people on the range, and I'll raise my hand, before we got going. And when you first meet Greg Lappin and he's on the range and he's kind of running through the in-brief, you're just swimming. Your mind's swimming. You're a little amped up. You're ready to shoot, because that's why you're here, but you don't quite know what the day is going to hold. And for Eben to start with those breathing exercises every day, I settled down after the first one, and then there were people that coming back that had, I think Mo and Asia. They said that was the first time they had ever shot a gun, ever. So I can only imagine how amped they were the first time they hear a shot go off or something, and that was a huge ad. But you draw that.
Even the breathing exercise itself, and I don't know if you did this or not, but just kind of feeling how invested people were in partaking in it, and kind of just surrendering and letting Eben kind of guide them through this almost meditation process, right? On day one, there's some people you could tell were like, what is this stuff, Day two, a few more people bought off on it. And dude, yesterday, everybody was in unison. You look around, everybody's bought in, everybody's going through the process, and everybody's enjoying sharing that experience with each other. And then at the end of it, everybody felt the energy that it created too. And it was like, man, that was just one more little thing that kind of brought this group of people together. And you stack enough little things, you put together a pretty powerful weekend. And Lappin says it all the time. Guns and Gis is kind of its own entity because every class is different, depends on who shows up and their skill sets and what they bring. But when people bring powerful perspectives or just a special understanding like he does, man, let's lean on it. Let's see what you got. Let's see what this feels like, you know? And so that was really cool to see.
Yeah. Yeah. And you mentioned with the breathing exercises, we were there to shoot, and maybe some people were looking around, what is this all about? That's one thing I think when you start talking to people that you realize is people bring different things to the table, but they kind of like all go together like pieces of a puzzle. And, and if they're kind of on that path of self-improvement, there's a lot of things. I mean, I joke with you from the day one that we were talking, I'm like, if you knew everything, so my wife, Michelle, is a nutritional therapy practitioner, and she's always been, it used to be 2 years ahead of where my mind was ready to go as far as taking care of ourselves, taking care of our health, really kind of getting away from Western medicine. And we have to be deathly ill or something falling off to go to the doctor. And that's kind of the way we've grown as a family. And
so you're saying like, she's been kind of like 2 years ahead of you on like developing these perspectives and these practices and whatnot. Okay.
I would say, I've heard the word kind of used in our circles as she's our healer.
Okay.
And I know that she loves hearing that. So I want her to hear that today. And
how fortunate are you to have a healer, not only in your circle, but literally your ride or die.
Yeah.
That's pretty powerful.
It's grown us considerably closer, especially the more that I've kind of been on the path and kind of grown in awareness of my own body and where I want to be physically. But even back in the day, I would say, so my son, Carter's 23 and Trevor's 20, and they're amazing young men. And so I would definitely want to shout them out because they'll be listening to this. But I shout it out because where our kind of healing journey started through Michelle is we had, my wife had carpal tunnel syndrome, and she couldn't sleep through the night. She'd sleep 2 to 3 hours on one side, and her side would be completely asleep. And she'd roll over to the other side, and that go to sleep. And
is that something that affects? Whenever you hear that, you think about the hands.
Yeah.
Is that where it primarily affects?
Yeah, hands into the arms. It really constricts like that nerve, various nerves in your wrist, and it kind of closes that off. So you almost think like a grip in jiu-jitsu. If someone gets you really good.
So it's almost like it cuts off the circulation or something. Huh? Okay.
Exactly. And so I don't know about you, but if you get 2 or 3 hours of sleep and then wake up and have to move around and then get 2 or 3 more hours on a consistent basis, that's
nightmare. Terrible. Yeah.
So I think like a lot of us, her journey to find some type of alternative, because the suggestion there is a surgery, so they basically cut your wrist open. I forget exactly how it goes, cut the nerve or whatever. I'm definitely not a doctor. I'm not going to speak to anything but
there's a carpal tunnel surgeon out there right now saying this guy doesn't know what the fuck he's talking about.
That's a guarantee.
You are accurate, sir.
Yeah, we can talk data science if you want to get into that. That's my profession, but that is not. I could be a doctor, like our first lady is a doctor.
That's right. Yeah.
But no, so she started down that path to I think pursue self-healing, and then we had my oldest son at the time, and he had eczema, so like really big skin irritations. And you ever hear that saying, they're not comfortable in their own skin?
Yes.
He
was
literally at a very young age not comfortable in his own skin. And I mean, that can be digestive. That can be so many different things. But from a mother's perspective, she wanted to pursue that, and she wanted to pursue healing. Because again, what's the recommendation? Steroids or topical creams or injections or whatever.
Instead of rebuilding the proper gut microbiome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And those words. And how many people know a gut microbiome?
Yeah.
And that sounds so unusual to people. But my wife was driven in that direction. She started learning about those things and reading about those things. And then, I mean, just kind of, I want to kind of culminate where our family was at in the direction we could have gone at if we hadn't chosen an alternative, and if we hadn't sought out maybe another opinion, another way. And I think it's so important, like anything you do in life, like there can be the suggested way, the way that everyone's going, and the ability to look at it objectively and say, maybe that isn't the path for me. I think we said a lot this weekend, something's wrong, but just get it done, figure it out, find a way, and going beyond just kind of the norm or the path that everyone else is choosing can be so very rewarding. And we could not have guaranteed it in the time, but we knew we needed to do something different because we were starting to get into that Western medicine system and be absorbed by it. And once you get in, I think we all know it's prescription on top of prescription, and you don't get out.
And then it's prescription to deal with the side effects from the other prescription.
That's right.
It's nuts, man.
That's right. And we didn't want that obviously didn't want that for our boys.
Especially, you said he was young. How old was he when you guys were dealing with this?
I mean, he had really bad breathing too, and just skin conditions. It was, I mean, I think it was just really dietary and environmental. I mean, there's so many things that we're exposed to every day, the heavy cleaners, ingredients in food, etc. And he also, I have to remember, he had kind of he would get colds and he'd get a croup cough.
Yep.
And that was very young, because I remember holding him and he didn't, he couldn't put into words. So I would say it's probably, maybe around like that 1 year range. He's 23 now. So again, I already told you, I have a general memory, but time frames are a little tough.
I'm the same way, bro.
Yeah. But no, I remember, so we're in Minnesota and he would get croup cough overnight and we'd wake up to it. I mean, it'd be usually a surprise. Like he'd be kind of fine, or he'd start to get croupy, we called it. And then he'd get like this really guttural cough, and he'd wake up to it and he'd be scared. And the kind of the remedy for it in the moment was you would take him in the warm shower and get the warm shower going in the steam just in the room. And then you'd go outside. And we live in Minnesota. So sometimes that was 20-degree nights, 10-degree nights, winter, summer, and he'd calm down.
So that's like almost the original contrast therapy.
Yeah. Yeah. Healing.
Yeah.
It was the only way to get him to settle down. And what that was really difficult to see, to be holding your child and literally uncomfortable in his own skin, and dealing with those breathing issues. But it drove home the point that we needed to do something different. We were getting on that path. And then just my youngest son, Trevor, he had an issue that we didn't recognize right away. He would be eating, and especially chicken, steak, beef. He would never clean his plate. And it was unusual because my oldest eats everything in sight, and got into swimming, and then was full bore. I always used to joke, as a family, our grocery bill is only second to our mortgage. And then as they got older, it got very close. So I quit joking about it. But he wouldn't finish his plate, and I, as a dad, you're like, finish your plate, like forcing him, and he's like visibly uncomfortable with it. And after a while, like, what's going on? Well, he had an issue digesting protein. And so when you can't digest protein, I mean, we know from like the carnivore and everything that we've done, when you eat a little bit too much steak, and that is a thing, you get a little uncomfortable. You might need some digestive aids. Now we know about those, like a beta or some type of supplements to help get your liver going and help get your digestion going and absorb that. Well, he had difficulty doing that. And again, never diagnosed like through a doctor, because at that point we were just like, okay, we're not going that route at all. But again, a son that was uncomfortable and was underweight, and some people would be like, why is your son so skinny or little? And
because we're starving him.
Yes, because I tell him never to finish his plate. And so you get that a little bit. And what I think that did was it ingrained a couple of things. It set my wife on the path as healer, and she's an amazing woman in so many regards. She's compassionate. She's full of empathy for people. She wants to heal people. She wants people to live lives that start going down those alternate paths. Because as we've seen, and I'm sure we'll get into, if you follow the norm, I was overweight. I was the 30-year-old dad drinking craft beer and watching NFL religiously. And I say that religiously because it was 6 hours or 9 hours on a Sunday and the 3 hours for Monday Night Football. And I was drinking craft beers while I was doing it, and I was playing fantasy football, and that was most of my 30s.
That's insane. It really is insane when you think about it, because think about, and in full disclosure, like we had some jiu-jitsu on this weekend because it was a big tournament, right? I like watching the guys that are the pinnacle of what I like, watching them execute jiu-jitsu, right? Or sometimes I'll watch the UFC because, again, as a martial artist, watching guys at the pinnacle of the activities that I am intrigued by, it's cool to watch sometimes. But I don't ever put a high level of importance on it. A perfect example of that is there was a UFC fight that maybe I would have watched on Saturday, except I was out doing something important with people that matter on Saturday. So it wasn't even a consideration like, oh man, I'm going to miss it. And such a huge percentage of our society prioritizes their time to watch other men live their dream. And it's sad.
Yeah. And I think where that goes, talk about kind of the traditional route, the route that many, the path that many travel, or however you want to put it. What that does is it gets people into the mode of being all words and very little action to no action.
Mm-hmm.
And, that's where I was going. And so I was having carpal tunnel issues too. I mean, just, I think it's more like weight and just general lack of using my body to do anything except go get craft beer and then, sit on the couch on a Sunday. And it is such a time drain. It is. Hey, if people like NFL, I was talking to attendee at Forge Ferocity. I still like the training camp. And as the guys get going and just seeing the athletes come and get running, it reminds me of like those summer football, training when it gets going. And there's actually Thursday night when we got to the gym, someone's son was here with his like football uniform on, no shirt, just like running around. And I'm like, oh, I remember those days. It takes you back there. So, it's a good memory. But it becomes absorbing. And it becomes, I think it like numbs you. It's very comfortable. It's very acceptable. I mean, we're in Minnesota, so we have the Vikings, and no, I'm not like a diehard Vikings fan. I really don't care anymore. In fact, one thing that drew me to the Pacific Northwest is I really got involved when Marshawn Lynch was huge. After the Vikings had just stomped on my heart so many times. I'm like, Seattle's at least fun to watch, and got into that a little while, and always had liked this area, and got into that. But so I can see the draw. But the danger is like that comfort that it offers absorbs, and you start to go towards that more words and no actions in all your relationships. And my relationship with my sons was the thing that drew that out.
Wow, man. And yeah, and I guess like I shouldn't shit on people watching professional sports because it's literally like everything else in life. It's a dichotomy, right? There are shows that I watch. You could say the same thing about Game of Thrones, right? Why am I giving time to Game of Thrones? Because I enjoy it, right? But it's a balancing act. And I personally have friends that like the NFL is the most important thing in their life. And at that point, it's like, man, what are you doing? It doesn't make sense to me. But I love it when people are on living a certain way and prioritizing certain things. And then some type of epiphany changes the whole trajectory. And you just said it, for you, it was your sons. But saying it was your sons, was there was there a specific defining moment, or how did that transpire?
Yeah. 100%. So for our health journey overall, 100% of the credit to my wife, because we were in pain. We were hurting for our children. You want to take that pain away from them. You don't want your children to have digestive issues. You don't want them to have skin conditions. You don't want, when I was holding my son and he was croup coughing, and for any parent out there that's ever heard it, I've heard it sounds worse than it is, but it doesn't matter.
Yeah, the story you tell yourself is like they're fucking dying.
Yeah,
I'm sure.
I mean, even now, he's 23. I start getting like a little teary. It's like, it was tough. It was tough holding him. I wanted to take that pain from him. I would have taken anything to take that pain from him and that experience. But that drove home that. And then, so you asked kind of an occurrence or kind of what drove that home. What was the light bulb moment? And it's kind of a little progression. So in 2018, my wife and I watched a film. It's called The Real Skinny on Fat. And it's probably still out there. It's like one of those docu-series. And it had like David Avocado Wolf, who, for those of you who don't know, I'm just amazing dude. And maybe a dude that you wouldn't look at and be like, I should listen to what this guy's saying. But it really got me into don't look at appearance, look at content. And like Mark Sisson was on there, who does like the Primal Kitchen.
Yep.
And big into keto. And so that became kind of my gateway of interest was, this Mark Sisson's out there and he's an endurance athlete, but yet he does keto and he looks super fit. I think he's like 69 and shredded, I'm like, okay, I'd like to be 69 and shredded. Like, what? I want to find out more. Well, that documentary asked two questions that really stood out and changed kind of the direction of my life. It asked, do you eat because you're hungry or do you eat because you're bored? And it's the way somebody asks a question sometimes, it just like it phrases it in a way to make you think about it in a way that you never have before. And it can just be one question. And I worked from home quite a bit and worked from home a little bit then. And I'd catch myself. I'd be going to the pantry, grabbing some pretzels or something. And I'm like, okay, am I eating because I'm hungry or am I eating because I'm bored? And almost every time, without exception, is
because you're bored.
Yeah. Or just something to do. How many people do that? Like, right.
Well, dude, I learned that lesson. I've done a lot of fast. I don't know if a lot, maybe 10 throughout my life, varying from 2 to 8 days. But this last fast with no water and no food, it really drove home some lessons. And that was one of them, is that a lot of what we consume is more out of habit than out of necessity. And I don't think I ever even really knew what hunger felt like until this last fast, because there was times when it was like my stomach felt like it was in knots because it wanted food so bad that it was actually like I could feel a pain emitting from my stomach. But the reason I bring that up is because of exactly what you said. Like, we have just kind of become accustomed to snacking throughout the day and keeping our digestive system plugged full of food the majority of our waking hours. And it's strange that that's become our habit, because that's not the reality of the human experience.
Yeah. No other time in human history has that really been an option to
Yeah.
even do that. And again, that goes back to, is it bad to eat? Is it bad to indulge once in a while? No. Is it bad to watch NFL once in a while? No. But, it becomes absorbing because it's a comfort foods. You even hear that term. The other question that was asked in that, and it really, from like a man's perspective, it asked, do you control your food or does your food control you? And I mean, what guy, I would hope most men say, I don't like to be controlled by things.
Yeah.
And phrasing it that way and turning it around and then kind of combining that with now I realize I'm eating just for something to do. And like, how like pathetic is that? And it's almost like gluttony, where you're just like, I'm just stuffing myself, and it's got to be breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And you mentioned fasting. That kind of got down. There's like Dr. Jason Fung, and he's got the Complete Guide to Fasting is a great book that I read.
I've heard his name referenced with really good material about fasting. I haven't checked him out though.
Yeah, I think he's a Canadian doctor up in like Toronto. I could be totally wrong there, but I mean, he kind of outlines what fasting looks like, and it got me into it, at least consistently intermittent fasting. So I'll stop eating at like 8:00 at night, and then I won't eat until noon the next day or 2 the next day.
And you know what's interesting about when you start doing that? On one hand, yes, it's good for your physiology, but it also it empowers you, because it's like, oh, the food's not in control of me. I'm in control of the food.
Yeah.
And I heard Jocko say this one time. He's like, hey, he had like a long travel day and he didn't have access to any healthy options. So he just said, hey, you know what? I'm just not going to eat today. And he said, I ended up going the full 24 hours and I didn't have any food. And he goes, and you know what that taught me? Roger that. Don't need food. And like a very simple Jocko statement, but that's the truth. Hey, this thing doesn't control me. I control it. And what percentage of Americans are in control of that? It's very, very few.
Yeah. I was just going to ask you, like, what percent of Americans do you think understand just that?
Yes. And that's even another layer. A lot of people, not only do they not have an understanding of it, but they probably aren't even aware that they should have an understanding and a control over it.
Yeah. 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 So, I mean, it was little lessons like that kind of started, like I said, kind of changing the course, like really enlightening that there was another way to go. And so you kind of, again, like I go back to truth, like you just hear people speaking truth and obviously they're living it and they're knowledgeable. And you're like, oh, well, there's knowledgeable people that aren't like Western medicine or the traditional route. And you would ask kind of was there an event? And I think I sent you a picture as we got to know each other. I call it Doughy Dave. And, but you know what it was? I was never like gone physically. Like I don't think I would have ever ballooned up to 350 or 400, or I wouldn't be on like my 600-pound life.
Yeah.
But I definitely wasn't healthy and I definitely did not like the way I looked. And I look at it now and I'm like, it's unacceptable.
Unacceptable is the right word.
Yeah.
And man, you've heard me say this on the show a lot. I'm sure if you don't like who's looking back at you in the mirror, that's a tough place to occupy. That's a tough place to live inside of, because that's you know? And when I say that, that doesn't mean the person in the mirror has to have a 6-pack and be 8% body fat. That might be the goal, but you don't have to be at the goal to be proud of who you are. To be proud of who you are, I honestly think you just have to look at the person in the mirror and say, hey, he's better than he was yesterday.
Yeah.
And if you're that person, you're proud of yourself.
Yeah. And I would hope, just kind of going back to this weekend too, with Guns and Gis, there's so many people that I hope they're thinking exactly that. I know that there's people that attend it that aren't where they want to be, but the guts that takes to come out here, maybe be amongst a group of people that you don't know. You're going to go shoot at a high level. You're going to go do jujitsu. You're going to learn all these new things, and you're going to take that on. So for anybody who's doing that,
yes,
look in the. So anybody that attended, anybody that's attended in the past, how many attendees did you say that you now have for Guns and Gis over the years?
Well, that was our 11th class with 30 people each one. Okay. So that's 330 people.
Yeah. So that's a lot of lives that whoever's done that. Like,
we've had a lot of repeat attendees, so that's not.
I noticed that.
Yeah. So to say 330 individuals is actually a little inaccurate, but still.
Yeah. Again, let's not be number guys today.
Yeah. Yeah. You're always a number guy.
Yeah, I'm always a number guy. I'm taking. I've unplugged successfully. For anybody, just a pitch for Guns and Gis there too is anybody that wants to unplug, come out here, tell your family you love them. Maybe text them at night to let them know you survived the day.
Yeah.
But unplug.
One of my favorite things that I heard this weekend, and it might have been you that said it. I forget who said it, but you said, look around this campfire right now. There's 30 of us sharing stories and not one person has their phone out. Not one. And you know what? There have been camps when I put that out. Please don't bring your phone to the campfire unless you want pictures. I didn't put that out this camp. People came to that choice on their own because they were more interested in investing in what was right in front of them instead of seeing who texts them or what's on Instagram.
Yeah.
And that's in today's world, that's special.
Yes,
you'll be hard pressed to find a group of 30 people, and we got rained out about an hour early. So it was that the bonfire was cut a little short, but still we were down there for 4 or 5 hours.
Yeah.
And people were investing their energy into the moment. And I love that, man. I love seeing that. And I've now created a life where I get to And don't get me wrong, I talk about it on the podcast all the time. I don't have my phone defeated yet. There's still a discipline battle with the phone that I'm still engaging in, and I'm aware of it, at least.
Yeah.
But I do block out large blocks of time on a nightly basis, about from 4 to 8. My phone's in my office plugged in, and I don't check it.
Yeah.
And for those 4 hours, I'm invested in human beings. Another thing that I was thinking about when you were talking right there is how you were saying it was intimidating for some people to show up and jump into shooting, jump into grappling. And sometimes that's lost on me because shooting and grappling has been a regular part of my life really since I was a child now. And when I say child, early 20s, because they're children to us now, right?
Yeah.
Your children are literally
yeah.
early 20s,
Yep.
you know?
Yeah.
And for me to put on my gi and have another man get on top of me and sweat on me, that's just called Monday night. And I have a high level of comfort around that now. And sometimes I forget that, man, that initial step into that world can be very difficult for people.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And you know, going back, so I sent you that picture of Doughy Dave. Well, I was sitting next to my son, Carter. That was 2018. He was doing a triathlon that morning. And, you know, he was, so that was the year before his senior year in high school. And he had been a swimmer since he was like 10 years old competitively. And I don't know, people who have seen swimmers in the Olympics, I mean, they're just shredded. And they're
Super athletes.
yeah, truly super athletes. I've done football, basketball, baseball, track, everything but swimming as a kid. And their practices, here's the thing about a 7,000 yard practice. You can't be in the middle of the pool or you can't be in a set with your coach and say, I'm not feeling it today. There's a lot of baseball practices. I fell off the couch right before I'd go, or football practices. You can kind of fake it, or you can be in the midst of other people. Well, when you're swimming, the problem with stopping swimming is you sink.
So, yeah. You either keep working or you die.
Yeah, it's a constant. I mean, you're just in the crucible all the time. But so he was doing the triathlon, and I was sitting on the lawn watching him, and that's fine. I mean, I always said as a dad, I wanted to be there to support their events, but I was watching him. I was incapable of performing that triathlon, and he was doing a sprint. So what a sprint is, this is about a 500 yard swim. You bike about 12 to 14 miles, and then you run a 5K. So that's about 3 miles. And so, I mean, those aren't alarming metrics. That's not an ultra marathon or anything. But I saw old people, young people, people of all shapes and sizes running and competing in this. And I asked myself a question kind of coming off that documentary, because I started to look at my health and be like, this is not acceptable. I want to change. I don't know how, but I saw people competing. And I was like, I don't think I could do this right now. And I think a lot of guys get into their 30s, and I'll own it. I was living in my glory days. Oh, I was an athlete. I did a lot, but I hadn't done jack shit for 15 plus years, at least. And it just hit me that to my son, again, going into a senior year, and he was competitive in swimming, and I'd always be like, well, he's competitive, and he saw Michael Phelps swim, and Michael Phelps brought a lot of people into the sport of swimming, and I'm like, and he was, I want to be the next Michael Phelps. And as a parent, you want to support that, you want to drive that, you want to push them. Yeah. I mean, just like, you know, if it's jujitsu and that was your passion, or even if that's not your passion, if it's your child's passion, you want to push them. And I think a lot of parents get into that boat of like, I'm going to push, and I'm going to pay for the private lessons, and I'm going to tell them what they should do, and I'm going to get them to workouts. And the problem was, and it hit me like, you know, they say it hit you like a ton of bricks. It just knocked the window out of me almost sitting there that day, that I had done exactly what I had been raised like, that I was a father of all words and no action. And I was trying to get my sons to understand that I had been an athlete somehow, you know, in their minds. And I think that you said, and I can't agree more, you know, our children won't do what we tell them to do every time, but almost every time they will do what they see us do.
Yes.
And I was doing nothing except taking up space. And, you know, it's not great, but at the same time, the couple of things we talked about today, first of all, balance. Like, you know, the there's things you can do. There's paths you can be on, and you can drive really hard. But I hope no one listening thinks it's just you got to go hard all the time, because you can indulge, you can have fun with life, you can watch NFL, you can have a piece of cake. If you take the inventory and you're still on the path and you're improving and you're bettering yourself and you can be honest with yourself and you're happy of how you look in the mirror. But when you're not, and when it first hits you, it can be overwhelming. Well, I just said something's got to change. So I listened a lot to Mark Sisson and like his ketogenic diet, and I tried that for a long time. And guess what? When you don't eat carbs for the first time in your life, and you cut those out, and you start eating clean, around kind of the outsides of the grocery aisle, the veggies, the lettuce, the meats, the proteins, you'd lose weight most of the time, or you look better, or you function better. I mean, I know everybody's different, but I did, and I'm like, okay, well, I can change myself a little bit aesthetically through actions. And then another thing I started doing was I just started walking, because walking is kind of a very accessible. Get out of your house, walk. We live in a great neighborhood, lots of great places to walk with my wife. But for some reason, that competitive drive from being an athlete started to come back. And so if I was going to walk in 2018, I decided I'm going to walk every day for a year. And I actually don't remember why I did that. I think it might've been like the primal like path, they're saying, this the benefits of walking, but I got competitive with it. And I said, okay, I'm gonna walk every day for a year. Again, I don't know exactly why, but I would encourage anybody that's thinking about running or getting active it's been a while. Maybe you're not where you want to be physically. Just try that, because you can pull your spouse in, your loved one, your kids in. I was talking to Jordan, who attended Forge Ferocity. Like, get that stroller out. He's got a 9-month-old son. You get that son out and get him rolling around. He's like, yeah, we do that all the time. And it's a great way for my wife and I to just engage with each other and to be active. Well, sometime like in the course of that 1 year of walking every day, I said, well, now I think I can run a little bit. So, I'd run a little bit, and I'd be gassed, and I'd walk for a bit. I'd run a little bit more. It was really a progression. And it was really beneficial. So, I mean,
which, like, if we're being honest, that's the correct way to do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
You go from the couch and you're following Cam Hanes on Instagram and you say, I want to try a 50K. You're not going to have success with that formula.
Yeah. I've become the running friend now. I don't know how that happened. I honestly, until probably 2020, would make fun of people running every time we do. Yeah. And then people look really funny running. And I'm sure I'm one of them. But so I've become the running friend. And so people come to me with like, hey, I'm looking to get into running. Like, what should I do? And the first tip I give them every time now is I say, don't run. Yeah. Cause it's terrible. It is really terrible for you. There's benefits that you draw from it. But if you want to find out a way to injure yourself, running's always good. But no, I mean, jokingly, you're right. It is. You got to start somewhere. And I don't know that like everybody should just fall. They couch to 5K. Like I can't stand those terms where they give you the training plan. Like, oh, you haven't done jack with your life for X amount of years. Hey, here's how we can get you to run 3 miles and probably injure yourself. But getting active, whatever it is. And sometimes it does need to be tear off that Band-Aid and experience a little trauma and injure yourself.
For sure. Yeah. For sure.
And now I'm weird. I mean, I don't like being injured, but when I get injured, I'm like, okay, how do I think my way out of this and get beyond it and get a plan and heal? And that's all part of the experience and the path too.
So you went from walking to adding a little running in, and then in today's world, how often are you running? I know you don't want to do numbers today, but just I want people to be able to kind of conceptualize where you started and where you're at today. So, because one thing you said is you're still a big dude, but you're big as in what, 6'2", 205 or something like.
Yeah, right on.
Big, strong athlete, but down 50 pounds from where you were when you started this journey, which is huge.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, as far as like numbers, so just on that progression, to finish that up. So in 18, I start walking, start to run a little bit. In 19, I did that triathlon with my son.
Okay.
And so kind of building into that to where current day, I crossed the finish line, that day, from the triathlon, and it was not a glorious time. I mean, I did not rip it up. I think I had a road bike that I had ridden one time. It broke down in the middle of the race and got passed by a bunch of old guys. But I tell you what, old guys in a triathlon, all shapes and sizes, old women, all shapes and sizes, they'll whip your ass. They're the real deal. And what's cool about that is it's like, you don't have to be Greg Anderson, shred it, black belt in jiu-jitsu. You can find your path and you can be a badass on it. So I finished that day and I crossed the finish line. And I did not expect this. It was a lot of work and I was getting into it again, but I broke down. Like I was just,
dude, I feel it right now as you're saying it.
Yeah.
The emotions behind the last time you were at that event, you felt like a non-performing spectator, and that came with a little bit of shame. And then the next time around, dude, you're crossing the finish line. Who gives a shit what your time is? You crossed the finish line and you did that with your boy. And that's fucking powerful, man.
Yeah. I think we've all heard that watch UFC, that speech. I forgot the fighter's name that kind of came back in the 5th round and he had a head kick knockout and head kick bang. And his coach right before the 5th round was saying, you got to pull this back from the fire. And I think that's the best words I can say. Because when I crossed the finish line that day, I pulled my life back from that fire. I was going down a path that I would, maybe I lived to 70, maybe I lived to 80, maybe I lived to 90 because I am blessed with longevity in my family, but what a pathetic life.
Yeah.
And I don't mean to be mean and say other people are pathetic. I'll own that. I was.
Yeah.
It was unacceptable, like we said. And so cross that and so it's like, okay, you can. Now you can improve. And again, as an athlete, a competitor, and my wife will be listening to this. She's like, yeah, you're way too competitive. I'm like, you don't even know how I used to be. It brought that out again. And we had guys talk about that this weekend about like reclaiming themselves and pulling it back. And you just got to start somewhere. And I would wish that upon anybody to learn how capable they are and start being truthful with themselves and assess. So yeah, where I'm at now, by no means super athlete, but at 48, I feel really good. I always land about like the top third in like triathlons, top third in road races now. I did a half marathon in June, which was a really cool experience. For the first time lining up, when you line up for either a half or a marathon, you can get in pace groups.
Mm-hmm.
And so, there would be a pace group of like, oh, you want to do this half in an hour and a half. You want to do this half in an hour and 25, hour 20. I lined up and the only people in front of me were like the super athletes, like the 20-year-olds.
Hell yeah.
Just the crazy
the top
people.
performers. Yeah.
That can just, and the guy that won it was lined up right in front of me. And he was, I would say 5'6", maybe 130 pounds and shred it. But I'm like, yeah, dude, you take 70 pounds off me, I'll catch you. But, but that's running. But it's just, even you get those experiences from taking chances. That was a chance to go and do a half for the first time competitively and kind of like see where I'm at for marathon training. So I'll be doing a marathon in the middle of October. And it's something I kind of get to complete officially now. I ran one last year, but in Minnesota, believe it or not, in the first week of October, it was canceled due to heat, just like a freak of nature event with Minnesota weather. But doing some triathlons, doing road biking, and we can get into that later too, but doing another 100-mile bike ride this year to raise money and to serve others through a charity that I support and fundraise for.
Wow, man. No, I love it. I love it. This is, this is the endless endeavor. It's exactly what this podcast is about. And seeing people take those steps and commit and exercise the discipline. When other people hear the story and see you taking these steps and walking that path, it empowers others. And it's really cool, man.
Yeah. And I mean, just to be clear on that path, you talk about who can do what or how people should view themselves. I'm just the average American dad. When I was an athlete, I keep referencing back to that. I mean, I was, borderline college athlete. When I got to college, I'd been a high level athlete in high school, and then you get to college and everybody's a high level athlete, on the team. So you kind of drown out a little bit, and that's kind of where that journey ended. So by no means do I want to try to get across, like I was anything but, I would say average, and maybe, maybe a little bit above average, but I had gotten to a point where I was definitely not average. I was the norm. I was the standard American diet, loving football, watching, just, there's nothing going on too. There was no, I was a good father. I would say that. Again, my wife and I, especially led by my wife, we focused on our health. We were starting to focus on our health and get on that path as a family. We ate better. We, watch what we ate, watch what we consumed, tried to go organic and things like that. But by no means did I have any like drive. I was just kind of like we've talked about in reference to a few other things. It's kind of just like a vessel. I was consuming life and not really contributing at all.
One thing that you said just a second ago, I don't remember. I don't know if I'll be able to say it exactly how you articulated it, but it's kind of like the understanding that you kind of have to do what you can with what you have.
Yeah.
Right. And I mean, what better example of that this weekend than Asia?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Bro, I'm feeling it in my heart.
Yeah. Thanks a lot.
just bringing that up.
Yeah.
Right.
100%.
Because I mean, I don't know if I told you this, but when she came into the academy on day one, she literally asked me, she's like, hey, I have some pretty substantial disabilities. Is this something that you think I could do? And I didn't placate into her disability fucking whatsoever. I said, Asia, we all have disabilities and all of our bodies are fucked up to some degree. Yours may be more over here than that guy's is over there. But the truth is nobody here cares. You do what you can. And that's all that matters here.
Yeah.
And, I don't know. I know Russ really keyed in on it because she was struggling on the range.
Yeah.
She was struggling. She was struggling with some of the weapons manipulations. She was struggling with some of the shooting drills. And part of it was a lack of experience. But part of it was also, you could tell it was her physical disabilities.
Yeah.
And on day 3, when she started to put it together and she started shooting out at, I think she got past 50 yards.
Yeah.
Did you see the smile on her face?
Yeah. 100%. Yeah.
Well, let me say one more thing on this too, because that vibe that she carried from the range, bro, she brought it to the mats yesterday. And she did. At the end of the day, when she was picking up Christy Campbell, who's a much larger athlete than her and stronger and bigger and probably outweighs her by, 50 pounds.
Yeah.
Picking her up in the air and flipping her over and landing in mount. The smile on her face, bro, when she did that was something that in that moment, it's like, man, this is why we do what we do. And I even said, Joao, dude, look at this, watch this. And you could see the amount of pride she was pulling from that moment, because she's like, not only am I doing it and feeling good about myself, but other people in this room that I'm sharing time and space with see my success. And not only do they see it, but they're celebrating it. And she did another one and the whole mat room started clapping. Think about that moment, bro. And the smile, dude, if I could package up and sell the smile that was on her face when she did that, we'd be fucking millionaires, bro. The feeling that she was able to derive from putting herself out there, doing something really outside of her comfort zone, and then after 3 hard days finding success, man, dude. It was really, that was one of the highlights for me, for sure.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, I love that story. So now we're going to get into it.
Let's get into it, dude.
All right. So, so I shot behind, so I was alpha team, and then we'd rotate. For those of you who don't know, on the range, you rotate. So I was on alpha, and Asia was on Bravo, and every 3 days we shot on the same target. So
so you were partnered up with her.
That's right. Yeah. So
I wasn't aware of that because I was working down on the left side of the range.
Yeah. Yeah. So she, first day, like you said, I mean, every day, everybody, to some extent or another, was learning something new, manipulating their weapon in ways they hadn't, doing some drills that they hadn't. I mean, I'd talked to a lot of, another pitch for Guns and Gis, I talked to a lot of high level shooters, over the course of the weekend on the range. and Lappin and you provide them things to think about, ways to manipulate their weapon, drills to do that. They had many of them had came back from Bravo team, and as we were going up to the line, they said I had never worked on anything like that. I had never addressed that in my shooting, and they got something out of it. So from, like we just mentioned, someone who had never shot before all the way up to the proficient shooter, there's something there. But with Asia, she would shoot and she'd come back and we kind of like have little exchanges. And, I was really trying to encourage her so getting into it, where I'm at right now is, I made a change and I've seen a lot of benefit, and you've made a change, and you've taken stances and you've taken action and you put it behind it, and you've seen how that has benefited you.
Yeah.
It's made you a better human being. That was clear before I ever got to know Greg Anderson on a Forge Ferocity Zoom call. And I'd send you like little notes here or there on Instagram. I know you get flooded, man. So, but I just wanted to be like, I want to encourage that, and so I'd hear like you'd put out a really good pod, and the t-shirt I got on right now, I bought it before I even knew you. Cause I'm like, I just want to support that. Cause that's truth. That's someone's pursuing self-betterment. That's someone who's building a culture to improve others around them. And I think you said, if you could bottle it, you could be a millionaire. I see it in your face that like you're experiencing that wealth emotionally.
Yes.
And it's shaping you and it's changing you. And again, going back, like if you had just stayed Crazy Anderson, and I loved Crazy Anderson during COVID. That kept me sane. I think I mentioned that.
Yeah.
I think I have a few of those podcasts bookmarked in my Spotify. But if you would have just stayed that way, you'd have been another pundit. You've been another like, oh, here's the guy who just gets angry at the government.
Yeah.
And as much as I enjoy that, 1,000 times I've enjoyed, again, seeing you become a better father, a better leader, able to articulate and drive podcasts and get the most out of your guests and bring guests on that have stories to tell, because you see how it allows them to free up and start bettering themselves or share their stories of bettering themselves and becoming better human beings. And I came out here and I mentioned very early on, I think I'm always an oversharer because I'm Mr. Vulnerable, because it's the only way to live.
Yes.
Like if I'm too vulnerable for you, then we're not going to click and we're not going to vibe. And that's fine. That's fine. If I'm not everybody's cup of tea, that's fine. But the people I find that are okay with that and will return that in favor, look at Forge Ferocity. Those are some deep friendships very quickly.
Yeah.
So another pitch for anyone that's not vulnerable or at least willing to tell the truth to themselves, start doing that and finding people who will do that will gravitate around you and you can be in a group with. But you did. And you created that for many people this weekend. And so I came out here and night one, Thursday night, we all did introductions. I said, where I'm at is I came out here and I don't know what this means right now, but I'm 48 and I'm going to bookend that part of my life. It's been good. The end of the chapter was really good, but things have to change because things that were once thought unattainable for me have become the norm. And I've started to use, like jujitsu, for example, I've started to use running as an excuse not to get after that. I did running because it scared me. It wasn't something I was naturally good at. And not that I'm a super athlete in it, but I've improved quite a bit. And to get out you tell me to run as long as you want me to run. I'll go figure it out. I'll get a plan. I'm not that intimidated by it anymore, but I now use a good thing as an excuse to cover up something else that's hard.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, that's jujitsu. Like it's intimidating. Plus I think it brings out a side of me that I thought I kind of put away. I was talking to a couple guys at the Airbnb that we shared for Forge this weekend. I said, it's like we're becoming high school wrestlers again.
Yes.
That's kind of not normal, right? Like
Yeah, it's not normal.
I'm going to go join a wrestling team effectively.
At 48 years old.
At 48 or 30.
And I forget, was this weekend your first experience with jiu-jitsu? Not
my first, but of any significance,
okay.
of any consistency, rolling 3 nights in a row and the level of instruction. And I'll say that for pistol too. I had shot a ton. And like, I think you had asked like yesterday, like, do you have any like, long range pistol experience? And no, I just shot at indoor ranges, but as a kid, like you shoot and I've been around guns and stuff. So a little bit more there, but even that was like, there was no base, I think it but coming out here, I said, I want to bookend 0 to 48. And now it's not that everything has to be drastically different, but I want to be more intentional. And why I want to do that is because I think during COVID, you heard a lot of people say you either got worse than you were or you got better, because you kind of saw a lot of people level up.
Yes. A very, very big blessing in disguise for a lot of people, including myself.
Yeah. Yeah. So I feel blessed to be around a group, a community that many people fell into that side of it. And with that, I started serving other people. And again, so like through charity bike rides or marathon or fundraising, or just even at church, or I tell you what, I even serve like in my profession on my team. So I work in big corporate America. And one thing that life can do, corporations can do, the military can do, is it can take your value and it can minimize it, because you're just part of a larger whole. They're not going to glorify everybody. You could do the greatest thing ever. Like I always joke, like, I mean, at work, we run like $1 billion profit and loss statements. We're $1 billion company. Like even just my product that I run would be like a top Fortune company, but there is no credit. There's no big slaps on the back. It minimizes your contribution, and life can do that, and relationships can do that, and the military can do that, right? Because like you're not going to. I mean, you tell me, they ever call you out of like, oh, Greg Anderson, you're the best. Please come in front of everyone, and we want to give you the credit that you so richly deserve.
No, yeah, you're a cog in the wheel, and I don't even necessarily say that with negative connotations, because I don't know if there is another way for these giant organizations or these giant corporations to necessarily function.
Yeah.
But once you understand you're a cog in the wheel, and if you're okay with that, I guess you're okay with that, right? But I feel like there's something bigger. If you want to shine, you want to be you want to be able to give the power that you have to the world. You have to figure out a way outside of that to be able to be that person.
Yeah, and I think you nailed it too, because it's not to play the victim. I work in corporate America. I get the game. They have investors. They need to make the money, and it's just the game. And so once you understand that you're a cog, or your values could be minimized, it's not of I'm the cog, my values minimized, I'm the victim. I mean, that's complete BS. What you do realize is that you're in that game. So as long as you choose to play it, that's the terms.
Yes.
Yeah. And then you can start kind of like saying, do I need to withdraw from that? Because is that taking too much of my value, or can I reclaim that in other areas? And through
that's a really powerful way to look at it. Can I reclaim it in other areas?
Yeah.
Because the reality of most people's lives are playing that game is how you put food in your refrigerator and a roof over your head.
Yeah.
And there's no shame in that. It's not a bad thing whatsoever. But if playing that game does start to detract from your happiness or hurt your soul, maybe you do need to make some massive changes. Or as you just articulated it, allow yourself the time and space to reclaim that version of yourself through other activities.
Yeah. Yeah, and I don't think he'd mind. Joshua from our group and attended this weekend, I mean, was a firefighter and drew a lot of identity from it. And we had the conversation. I mean, again, there's nothing he wouldn't share, is that he drew his value from that. And now he's seeing it. It can exist in other places of his life, because if it's taken away, then what's worse? Your value is taken away. And we heard that story from multiple people this weekend. And you hear, when you serve people and help people, you hear that story. People are just broken down and they don't have that value. Well, I really, through serving, found, so I nothing hidden here. I'm a Christian, a believer, and we've talked quite a bit about that. And I think there's ways that you can use it, that it's the self-help guides. It's the meditations by Marcus Aurelius. There is, the way the Bible's broken up is it's many books. And my pastor has a saying that, like, if you had a bad pizza, would you never eat pizza again? So maybe there's books like that you open up in the Bible and you crack open and you're like, this makes no sense, or I don't agree with what it says. Well, there's 66 other, or 65 other ones. Choose one of those and try that out and see if you can apply any of the principles. Well, I really found out for me, when I start serving other people, it is counterculture to some extent, what God wanted for me in life, not from me. Because I think a lot of people say, I'm giving of my time to serve other people, or I could be doing something else, but I'm gonna go serve. They kind of look at it as like they're giving something. And what I got was amazing blowback of what God had for me in life. And that I would say heavily was in probably 2020, really consistently start serving other people. And it changed my outlook in life, because when you find something that gives to you, whatever it is, when it's something positive and you start becoming a better person because of it, you want more of it.
Yeah, of course.
And so I came out here because now for 4 years, that's what I've been doing. And that's the best part of my life. And I can do that in all walks of my life. I can do that for my team. So going back to my team at work, even, they say, I've had a couple people on the team say, if something gets to us and it's negative, or something gets to us and it's bad news, we know it's bad news and we know it's negative because we know you stand in front of so much else for us. So I can do that for them. I can call them out in front of their peers on my immediate team, and I can provide those pats on the back and that recognition of a job well done. And I can grow them professionally, and I can put time into them and invest in them. And do I love corporate America? Certainly not. I'm more than done with it where I'm at in my life, but I am there and I can still be of service, and it's extremely empowering and it's extremely rewarding. And it allows that place, that surrounding that I don't want to be in, that I feel is kind of sucking the life from me, that's taking my time that I could be investing into other people and other areas of my life right now. It allows it to be not only tolerable, but in the moment rewarding.
Yeah, and actually enjoyable.
Yeah.
And I say this often too, like, don't misconstrue being a person who's drawn to service or giving to others or building others up as those things are a detriment to your own growth or yourself. It's actually the opposite. And I even kind of jokingly will say it sometimes that, like, maybe I am in service selfishly, because when I see Asia's fucking smile ear to ear, beaming love, man, that's what I'm here for, because I get to feel that power too. Just because it's my gym or I'm running the class doesn't mean that I don't get to receive as much as everybody else on the mat. And so, like, when you find that you put yourself out there and you facilitate other people's growth or other people's progression, other people's happiness, you absolutely get to be on the receiving end of that as well. And there should be no shame in doing activities with other human beings that bring you joy and love. And the more that you facilitate that for other people, it comes back on you too. And you deserve to have that. Yes. You deserve to feel those happy emotions and the powerful energy of love. Like, those are the things that we're seeking. Like, everything in life, obviously, I talk about on the show all the time, it's peaks and valleys and it's dichotomy. And there's going to be times when you're down in the dumps and you feel like shit. And if you have the capacity to build experiences where you get to receive love and friendship and camaraderie and tribe, invest in that. Even if it might be selfishly, but you got to be good first as well. So it's important to prioritize that.
Yeah. And I was thinking as you're saying that, I think a lot of people hear, oh, you have to roll jujitsu, or you have to do this, or you have to do that. Or they look at, like, the physical as something that they have to take on and conquer. And I think that you show people value by your actions. You can show people value by their words too. But for example, like, you might be listening to this and be like, oh, Dave, you must have had a miserable marriage up to that point, and your entire 30s must have been awful. No, I mean, my family is amazing. And my family life has progressively, to this day, to the point that I flew out here on Thursday, it's been the best it ever is. But the value that I was not showing was respect for my wife too. Mm-hmm. Because, I mean, what the hell? And I'll cut myself some slack, because I think in the world of podcasting, in the world of hearing, I mean, you mentioned Jocko and how do you have ever found, we talk about social media and the benefits or the downside, how would you have ever found a Greg Anderson and know about Electric North and Lake Stevens, Washington, and when you were in Minnesota, you didn't grow up in it. But when it just hit me. It's like, I'm being disrespectful of my wife. She deserves so much better, and she took and accepted so much less than we were happy. And
but that also lets you know how much more there is to pour into that cup too, and how much better it can get.
Yeah. And it never ends. I was talking to Greg Lappin, and just talking about what a talent he is instructing with pistol, and he knows it. Yeah, and he said, like, yeah, I know, I'm really good at this, and I love that, because I speak to a lot of guys that are amazing at things, and you tell them, and they're like, oh, you think so? But I love that confidence. But one thing he said is he never stops self-assessing. He never stops getting better. And that cup is never ending. You can completely pour into that. And that what you're pouring into is that value of other people too, through improving yourself.
Yeah.
And improving yourself, so what does serving look like? What does that look like to jump into that? I mean, I got great stories of serving, but a lot of serving is, our neighbors are gone. They're snowbirds, because I live in Minnesota, and that's a thing. People leave the state literally for 3 to 4 months so they can survive living there.
Because they don't want to be in your negative 10 degrees or whatever it is.
Yeah. Yeah. My Uber driver over
I
here.
can kind of understand that.
Yeah. My Uber driver did not appreciate the fact that it even got to negative 10 degrees. He did not like that story this morning. But yeah, I mean, so with them, we're like, we get their mail, we grab their mail, or if an Amazon package is delivered, you help them out, and you're just neighborly. And I think even that nowadays is kind of taking a slide, or you don't know who you're living next to. You've talked about that.
Yeah, it's bizarre.
Yeah,
you got human beings that, if you just draw a linear path, they're literally resting their head on their pillow 18 feet from where your head is rested on your pillow, and you don't even know their name.
Yeah.
It's bizarre.
And it doesn't have to be like a strong relationship. It's just like you do the right thing. And another one of our neighbors next door, let's just say the 2020 election, we had varying opinions of who should have been elected. And we'd sign each up. And it just wasn't how I wanted to roll. I really love them. They're a young family, young dad, great couple. They got a couple of like beautiful young boys. And we were outside one day, and I said, hey, Miguel, just to let you know, like, that's just a sign, but I love you guys. I want the best for you. You're a dad. And I know that collectively, neither one of us would come here and say, over those signs, we care more for that than our sons, than our boys. Because I see him, I see me and him. I see the young father not knowing what the hell he's doing, not knowing what's to come, but he's trying. And I think that a lot of people could focus on that. But, it's even that service. Like, it's just extending like a little compassion, and it's lifting up a message that like gets above the BS, because the BS is so strong and so noisy. We talk about social media. You can live at that level. You can live at that level where craft beer and the NFL or whatever is your life, and you can exist very comfortably and numb to reality. Because the reality, you mentioned in your gym, you have quite a few people. I mean, there's conflicting beliefs, but you come around and you address two things. And there's two things that really have been driving me in life. 2 words that kind of is the start of this new chapter. I said I was going to bookend 0 to 48. And so now where are we going now? I'm going to build it around 2 words, and they go hand in hand. One's capable and one is truth. I mentioned to you a few times, I read the book Endurance by Alfred Lansing, and everybody's been reading it. It's a Shackleton expedition.
I love that book.
It's for anybody that, I mean, I'll just make one book recommendation. I have so many that I could recommend, but that's, if you haven't read for a while, grab Endurance.
And if you liked Endurance, read The Wager.
I just picked that one up because you recommended that.
That is another fascinating story of people enduring a very similar situation. And there is a power to be derived when you see other human beings go through something that really feels unimaginable. But when you're not given a choice, you have 2 options, and that's to succeed or fail. And those men in Endurance, they chose to succeed. And I like to think of myself like you just said, Lappin was happy to admit that I'm very good at what I do, right? I like to also believe like, hey, I'm good at what I do, and I'm a tough, capable human now, and I've built myself into someone that I'm proud of, and I'm a resilient person. But then you read that, and there's a little voice in your head said, would I have been able to handle that?
Yeah.
Would I have been one of the people that persevered through that and showed the courage and the commitment to overcome? And the truth is, we'll never know unless I end up finding myself in a situation like that. But to have that conversation with yourself and to reflect and to think about those things that in itself is empowering. And those men lived on an iceberg for what, a year? Something crazy like that?
Yeah. And I mean, every worst case scenario happened to him. And it's set in the year 1915. So a little bit over 100 years ago. I think like Rogan always talks about, oh, that's only a few humans ago. The first thing I did when I read that book was I went and looked up my family lineage, because I was joking with you. I'm like, when did my family become a bunch of pussies? Because they were hard men.
Yes.
They were confronted with everything imaginable. And I think,
bro, they got on boats and said, let's go that way and see what happens.
Yeah. And for anybody that reads that thinks, or hears about it, that thinks, oh, well, that's just the depiction. No. Like, there was, and this was the days of like, there was not Netflix or anything to keep their phones to scroll on. They had diaries. Yeah. And they kept meticulous journals of every day of their experience. So if you want to triangulate truth and triangulate a story, they had more than enough stories to tie together. And that was a culmination and research. And the author actually went and I believe spoke with Shackleton's widow and got like firsthand experience of the stories too. So It's legit. Like there's not making that story up.
They hunted seals and ate the flesh and burned the fat for heat for a year. Yeah. And then the other thing to think about that's important is, because I used to live in Alaska when my dad was a commercial fisherman. So during fishing season, I was with dad on the boat. And in the poles, you have long seasons of light and long seasons of darkness. So those guys went through a winter down there where you might have had 22 hours of darkness a day.
Yeah.
It's really crazy to try and even imagine that perspective.
Yeah.
And then another thing that's fascinating is shortly after I read that book, they found the boat. Have you seen the pictures of the boat?
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. It's because of the cold Antarctic water. It's like pretty preserved too.
Yeah.
So if you guys have read that book or that story is something that's resonated with you, go see that. And it's just, it doesn't really add or detract from the story, but it's just a pretty interesting piece of history to see.
Yeah. I fully intend to get, so they have a print of so the Endurance is a ship. That was the why they named the book that, but they have a picture of the book, ice ridden. It basically got trapped. So I'm not going to ruin anything too much.
Okay.
But they have it just kind of in black. It's not even black and white. I think it's just at night. And it's just this boat just stuck. It's going nowhere. And it's never going to go anywhere again. But I want to have that. I want to have the print in my office. Every time I look at that, I want to think about capability. So what I thought about capability was that. So the amazing thing in that story is you would think with all the men on the crew, at some point they would have started like a mutiny, or they would start going a different direction. And by every single account of those meticulous journals that they stored, it was camaraderie. It was, we don't know how tomorrow's going to go. We don't know how later today is going to go. We could be, they had the tide of the ocean underneath their ice. So they'd have weird tides come up and crack the ice wide open between them.
Yes.
And almost fall in. I mean, how terrifying. They did
You're
not
truly
crack.
Living in 24/7 of a state of unknown.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's one quote that I had from this, I brought, because it talks about being capable. And I think capable is again, that first word that I'm really focused on. He said, the adaptability of the human creature is such that they actually had to remind themselves on occasion of their desperate circumstances. And that's what you get from reading it.
Yeah.
You listen to those guys, you're like, guys, you're like life and death. You're on the brink at any given second. And you listen to like, yeah, we played cards and yeah, we smoked some cigarettes, or we figured out what to go. There's guys that love to go out and hunt. And there's some guys who raise the sled dogs. I won't tell that full story, but
it's the human spirit.
Yeah.
Still being able to be alive and be present.
Yes.
In the face of absolute just worst case adversity.
Yeah.
And I got to taste a little bit of that in Iraq. Obviously, I would say maybe 4% of what those guys had to endure. But it became very apparent in 2004 that the city in which I was operating in and the missions in which we were doing were extremely dangerous. And I didn't know what tomorrow held. And not only did I not know what tomorrow held, but it started to become a belief in my head that it's like, you're probably not going to make it out of this, because it's a very, very dangerous environment and you're immersed in it and you're in it day in and day out, and sooner or later it's a numbers game and your number's going to come up. And through that kind of conversation with myself, you actually find peace in it, which is kind of bizarre. But do you find peace in your current difficult situation, or do you allow it to just continuously keep you in a state of anxiety or a state of depression? And that example of the human spirit being able to find some type of peace and enjoyment while you're literally freezing to death on an iceberg. And they didn't have the nice Arc'teryx rainproof coats, you know, they were in those, they're probably in soaking wet, frozen wool, just in a state of misery.
Yeah. Losing toes.
Yeah.
And not really complaining about it seemingly too much. I mean, maybe they left that out of the diaries to toughen themselves up a little bit, but in all reality, I mean, the word that I got from that book, I don't even know if it's like really phrased in there this way, but it's just capable.
Yeah.
Like, Dave, you're capable of so much more. And I think that you saw that. I'm glad that you shared that, because I've heard that you mentioned being in service. And I would say this, as gutty as those guys were, there was no bullets flying towards them. And I think a kinetic environment like you were in, don't undersell that.
Yeah, and you're true. You're very true. And I appreciate you saying that. But what's fascinating to me is, like, in combat, there's periods of immense danger. And then there's periods of time where you're back on base and you can kind of, and it's like, I wonder if those guys ever felt like they had moments to be able to just kind of relax and decompress a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow, man.
Yeah. I think that, and we hear it with stories of capability, and again, credit to you for bringing out those stories from people. You know, Angie's podcast, who I got to meet this weekend.
Yeah.
Anybody who hasn't heard her story, and I think it's probably one of your highest listened to pods or viewed.
Yeah, it was great, man.
And it should be, and everybody should listen to it and go back and listen to it.
I'm glad that she got to spend the weekend with us.
Yeah.
And be able to interact with people.
That was a good vibe. Sure.
And she got approached by people that I didn't know were so impacted by it. And Matt was one of them. And bro, like, he came up and shared his perspective with her, and it brought her to tears.
Yeah.
It's really powerful interaction, man.
Yeah. You phrased it too. I'm glad she got to spend time. Because I think what she saw too, and she needs to see, is that there's a lot of men out there that they'll lay it all out on the line for women.
Yes.
And that they love them, and that they'll provide for them, that they want to, and not only provide for them, but protect them, because it's the right thing to do. And there's just good humans out there that are, and the more she sees that, and she's seen that, and she's in she's in a culture which you helped create and construct a space for. I think so much of serving others and finding out what you're capable of doing is not only the hard things, but like doing the right things regardless of the situation. And so that, you know, that's definitely something great for her to be around and experience. And it's really cool meeting her too. And I think that what makes this weekend great, and we've talked about it in Forge Ferocity and in good friendships, the other word that I've really decided I'm going to start this chapter with is truth. And I want to be in scenarios where truth is the expectation. Truth is the culture.
Yeah.
I don't care. Because okay, so why would that be important? Like, there's truth all over, right? Well, we know that's not true, because we can't figure out. Like, you hear people say nowadays, like, I don't know what to listen to because I don't even know what to believe anymore. You know, I don't know, like, what's true and what's not.
Yeah, there's so much deception out there.
Yeah,
that it's tough to navigate.
Yeah,
but a lot of that stuff is external, though. We have a hard time discerning truth from things that are external to us. But we can start to manifest and provide truth within ourselves and within our circles. And I know that's exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah.
And here's the thing on that too, that I think is a really good point to bring up. I would say it probably took me until maybe this year or the last 2 years to be able to be comfortable in the truth, when sometimes the truth is very uncomfortable. Sometimes the truth hurts people's feelings. Sometimes the truth makes people feel bad about themselves. And I'm not saying the truth like, oh, you're fucking fat and lazy, right? I'm not saying like you use the truth to necessarily be derogatory, but a perfect example of that is Steven, who was in Guns and Gis with us this weekend. He's went through a phase in his life where he's went through a lot of struggles, right? And I'm not going to get into any of the struggles online on the podcast because that's between him and I. But he's come into this office and expressed a lot of concerns in who he is and how he's growing and how he's conducting himself. And I've got to the point where I've become very comfortable saying things to people that may be hard to hear, but they're hard to hear, but they're rooted in love. And they're rooted in wanting to see you be better and wanting you to become, as you're saying, more capable. And people don't misconstrue capable as shooting and fighting. It's an element of it, but it's a lot bigger than that too. And in order to be able to help people arrive at becoming capable, dude, this is why I fucking love you, Dave, because you're right. And I never thought of it like this, but as I sit here right now, you can't build people into being capable without the foundation of truth.
Yeah.
You simply can't. Those two things can't coexist without each other.
Yeah.
And it's a pretty fascinating realization I'm having right now.
Awesome, man. Yeah. I'm really a big believer in words. Your words matter because, and as you grow to love somebody, if they get down on themselves or even just like jokingly negative about themselves, I'm really quick to catch them and I stop them like, that's bullshit. Don't talk about yourself like that. Even if you're joking, there's something to it.
Self-deprecating talk is something that almost becomes like a self-fulfilling prophecy.
That's right.
And man, and I've been one of those guys, right? Where like, well, why would people listen to me? I'm just a knuckle-dragging Neanderthal, right? And it's like, it's kind of tongue-in-cheek. It's kind of funny. But at the same time, anytime you detract the worth of yourself or the power, and you're putting that out into the universe. And that's not going to do you any good. That's a real thing. I wish I could. I'm not going to be able to think of who it was, but the last time I said something, it was my one of my jiu-jitsu students, Danny, who you didn't get to meet this year. And Danny is a really powerful human being, and he's on his own journey right now, doing all the same stuff that we're doing. And by no means is he like someone that's arrived to enlightenment, but he has a couple things that are very important to him. And anytime in this gym, when he hears someone saying self-deprecating, he nips it in the bud immediately. And he's like, hey, please don't talk about yourself like that because you're telling yourself a lie. And it's like, dude, I love having people like that in my life.
Yeah. Yeah. You have to build environments. So you build, and you mentioned it doesn't need, so physical, what's a physical environment? Well, we're in one right now. And a lot of people come to it to get better physically. But it's also a place of truth. Like you roll on those mats. I tell you what, I rolled with Gabe towards the end of everything yesterday. And Gabe's a good dude. So shout out to Gabe. But I think he's white belt, probably really close to blue belt. He says he's been rolling almost 2 years and he's out in Kalispell rolling at a great gym. And I start rolling. I'm like, I told him, dude, I don't know what I'm doing. Like we're standing up. I'm like, I don't got much. So like, let's go and see how this goes. And he just slowed it down. He said, like, just slow down. And he showed me a couple of things. And I got truth out of that. I mean, I wasn't bringing much game to the equation, but it was okay.
That's a truth that most men in particular can't comprehend until they feel it.
Yeah. I needed it desperately coming out here. Cause you get to a point of like leadership or you get to a point of like in your friends groups, even, a lot of guys are coming along. A lot of guys are chasing on my tail, like as far as like events and races and stuff. But I'm kind of looked at as the weirdo or, they joke, what are you doing? Oh, I bet you're going for a run today or, lifting or whatever it is. And there's no one to knock me down, off that pedestal. And it was, I mean, it wasn't real, it was just in comparison to those around. But coming out here, I knew it. I'm like, I'm going to get knocked down. And I think I might have told you the first time, like, I can't wait. Like I needed it so desperately because I needed truth.
And I want to say this about getting knocked down too. Like when you hear that, don't misconstrue that as a negative experience, right? And one of my favorite examples of that this weekend was Mo. Mo showed up He's a lawyer, and he's never picked up a gun, and he's never stepped on the mats. And he literally showed up to Guns and Gis because one of his buddies signed up, and he goes, "You should come with me. And if you don't, you're a pussy." Right? Obviously, just having fun. You could tell they're homies.
Yeah, you need friends like that.
Kind of flipping him some shit though, but also it lit a fire, and he said, "Okay, I'll do this." Right?
Yeah.
And he pulled me aside. I think it was day 2, and he's like, "Man, all of this stuff on the mats, it's the biggest thing that I'm feeling right now is that it's providing a place where I get to I can play." And he had a big smile on his face, and he's feeling that truth. He's learning those lessons, but he's coming at it. The story he's telling himself is like a positive one. There's no negativity in it. He's getting to learn those lessons and feel that truth, and he's enjoying the process. Eben's another one. I mean, 6 years as an offensive tackle in the NFL, and he says, "I'm finding truth on the mats, and man, it feels good."
Yeah.
So don't think like we tell you, like you got to go out there and become capable and put yourself in these situations that, don't get me wrong, it definitely comes with an element of discomfort, but that doesn't mean it's a bad experience. It can be actually a very positive experience.
Yeah. As evidenced by me trying to get out of bed this morning to come here. I think I told you great 3 days, but if it had to be Monday too, I'm ready to go tomorrow with it again, but I need a little rest.
Well, that's an important thing to bring up, because when something is new and intriguing and you're feeling power from it, like I did with jiu-jitsu, but I was 22. So I did train 7 days a week, sometimes twice a day, because I was at a point in my life where my physical body, not only my physical body, but I wasn't married and I didn't have kids, right? So I had the time, but I also had the energy to invest in jiu-jitsu to that level. I roll 3 days a week now. That's what I do. Even at Guns and Gis, I didn't roll on Saturday because I was feeling a little beat up. And over the last 2+ decades, I've learned where I need to dial it up and dial it down. Even yesterday, I was feeling beat down, but I was like, you know what? This is last day of the camp, so I'm going to push it a little more. And if it breaks me down, that's okay, because the camp is concluded, and we can now rest and recover as necessary after the fact. But really, if you were older and you're starting jiu-jitsu, really listen to your body. But that's a tough dichotomy, because you got that weak voice in your head saying, "Don't go, don't do this, don't do that. This hurts, that hurts." And then you got the other voice that's like, "No, push through, go train, show up, invest in this, spend time doing that." And again, to use your word, the truth is somewhere in between those two things. Yeah. And you really have to be cognizant of that, especially starting at later in life. Tobin's a perfect example. Tobin's been one of my best friends since we were 18-year-old privates in the Ranger Regiment.
Yeah, great guy.
Isn't he rad, dude?
Yeah, amazing.
And he told me, he's like, because he started jiu-jitsu, I think 5 years ago. So he started at about 40. And because we've been homies since we were kids, but he was like a professional downhill mountain bike racer. And that was his thing all the way up until like 5 years ago.
Oh, really?
Yep. Yeah. And he was good, man. And one thing that he said that was interesting, he goes, "I've been thinking about jiu-jitsu, starting it at 40. And he goes, "You started jiu-jitsu in your early 20s. He goes, "You got to learn a lot of the do's and don'ts and the lessons when your body was capable of learning those lessons." He goes, I'm now learning those lessons in my early 40s. And he goes, "I think it's a much tougher path." And he goes, "And the reason I say that is because I can draw a correlation to downhill mountain bike racing." He goes, "I can go right now and go be pretty competitive in a downhill mountain bike race, even at my age right now. But it's because I learned all the painful lessons in my early 20s. He goes, if you told me I had to go learn how to be a high-level downhill mountain bike racer right now, I don't think my body has the capacity to learn all those lessons." And it's like, doesn't that apply to almost anything, I think?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, but that's, Yeah, I never heard it that way, and that's a really interesting way to look at it. What you can gain in your youth, and maybe people even dwell on that too. Like they think, "Oh, it's too far gone.
Yeah,
I'm 40. I'm not going to get there." And that
I hear
becomes
that all the time.
yeah,
I hear that all the time, and I tell people like it's not that you're too far gone or you're too old. You're just going to have to walk a very different path than if you started this at 20 years old.
yeah, and it's truth too. Like as tough as you guys are, uh, Lappin or Draw or yourself, you're okay being vulnerable. And I think part of like the truth too is telling yourself that, if I start jujitsu at 40, I'm not gonna go win worlds or something, but you know what I am gonna do? I'm gonna drastically improve myself.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna set the bar, and I'm gonna, be an example for my kids. I'm gonna be an example to my buddies, or, I'm gonna be the man that I need to be for my wife. And that's where you should draw your solace. And even if all that isn't true, you're doing the right thing, and you're taking the right step for you in that moment. I think that we draw because, and we see the Goggins and I love Cam Haines and everything that he represents. I mean, how can you not?
Yeah.
Awesome
human.
Yeah, awesome human being, and great message. Keep hammering. I write that on my arm occasionally in races to remind myself to keep hammering, because sometimes it's painful. But the reality is that the truth for you might not become them. That might not be your bar, your level. But if that's your measuring stick, then what would you ever do? If your measuring stick was like, I have to be the best, or I have to be the highest performing human in this discipline. I think that's the way a lot of people view it, or they look at like the contrast of them and those examples, and they never even try. And one thing that we talked about a little bit is the reward for trying something difficult like that, and going out and like knowing you're going to suck at something. I knew full-heartedly that I was going to come out and I was going to roll and I was going to suck. But did you hear, like, I wanted that.
Yes.
I wanted to be broken down.
And Jordan said that too at the fire. He's like, as someone that's been just blessed enough to be inherently good at a lot of things that I've strived to accomplish in life, the fact when I went and tried jiu-jitsu, it was so hard. And it was, and I, for lack of a better term, I sucked at it. Yeah. It's like there's actually a part of that is enticing and makes me want to lean into it more, because being a student of something after you've succeeded in other aspects of your life, it kind of lights that fire in you. I'm curious, do you know, like, give or take, how many rounds you got over the weekend? Like a handful?
Yeah, a handful.
Was there anything about that experience that was different than what you were expecting? Or did you kind of come to terms with like, hey, these people are probably going to do whatever they want to me?
Yeah, there was certainly that. That wasn't unexpected. First night, first roll was with Joshua.
Okay.
And in getting to know him,
he's a fucking beast.
Yeah, he's a beast. And not only that, but just like one thing I mentioned about this whole experience was, I'll use the analogy, but people say like, careful when you meet your heroes or whatever. It wasn't like a hero thing, but you have a high image of somebody, and then you meet them in person, and that can go, many different directions.
100%. Yep.
Sometimes you're like, oh, wow, this guy's, a total asshole. To like, oh, to this weekend, what I found out across the board, the cadre, Tobin, Chris, Will, everybody that was involved, your wife, Jenny, thank you, Jenny. I told her we felt like rock stars the entire weekend. We literally came and we get swag bags. First form set us up. We were treated like rock stars the entire weekend.
And she slayed on making that river experience be what it was.
Yeah.
Like that stuff is huge, man.
Absolutely. But it was so with that, the cadre, you did not disappoint. You exceeded. Like, I had a really high image of who Greg Anderson was in my mind. And it's like, oh wow, he's even something.
Dude, I feel
that.
that. Thank you for saying that, man.
And I wouldn't throw that around. I would just be like, yeah, it was okay.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, you're not going to come and be like, oh, you really disappointed me, bro.
Kind of okay. I probably just be quiet about that portion of it. And Lappin too, because Lappin I only knew through like the Fieldcraft survival videos.
Yep.
That he puts out, and I'm like, oh, great content. Like, every time I freaking listen to him, I'm like, he is so well put together, and I can learn something, and I do learn something. I take it away and I try to implement it, or I get the gear, or I try to implement the truth that he's speaking in his YouTubes. And I'm like, well, really put together guy. I was sitting on that range. And so here's my, so you asked who I rolled with. I rolled with Joshua, and that was the game changer. That was what provided something different. Because the very first thing that happened is came into the clinch. He gave me a bloody lip and a bloody nose. He did not stop. He did not ask if I was okay. We rolled through each other. And I will say for 4 minutes, we weren't giving each other anything. And I can't remember why I tapped. I think I got tired. And he, of course, complimented me right before the roll. Like, I'm about to roll with an endurance athlete. And then I got tired. So it's a different kind of
endurance for sure.
Yeah. Much respect to that. But that was one takeaway. And the other huge memory that I'll take back is on the range. I really fell in love with shooting. So I've had a Glock 19 that I carry, everyday carry. And I
shout out for choosing the best gun in existence.
Bar none.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I did, and I fell in love with it, and I fell in love with shooting. But here's why. And here's the thing with the jiu-jitsu too. At home, at the range, Lou and I talked about quite a bit. We're in states where a lot of times we have indoor ranges. And for people who shoot at indoor range, it's not ideal. It's loud. It's compact. You really can't do all the manipulation drills that you want to do with your weapon.
Yeah, a lot of time indoor ranges ban draws from the holster too.
That's right. Yeah, mine does. Yeah, so I didn't have an outside the waistband holster.
You want to hear something else really dark about indoor ranges?
I know where you're going.
You already know?
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah, go ahead.
That people will go to an indoor range and rent a gun for suicide.
Yep. It's happened at our local range twice.
It's happened at my local range twice. So if it's happened at both our local ranges twice, that lets you know it's not something that is, I don't know how prevalent it is, but it's not out of the realm of possibility. And I don't want to be around someone with a firearm that is in that mindset.
Not at all.
Not at all.
Yeah. I think that for Lou and I, that limited, our frequency quite a bit, if that's going to be our exposure.
Yeah.
My father-in-law actually had an outdoor range that we got to shoot at quite a bit, and our boys kind of came up on that,
nice.
Shooting rifles. And he passed away a little over a year ago, but really instilled some great values in us. And but with that, so coming out to the range, I think I mentioned to you, like my experience with pistols was always like the shooter at the range that maybe was a little bit better than I was, or the family member that shot a little bit more frequently than I had.
Yes.
So what you end up with that, and this goes for jiu-jitsu too, is I end up with a lot of tips or ideas or direction, but they're random. You could put them together on a piece of paper and you'd be like, well, this is just a bunch of random stuff. It'd be like, oh, on your Glock, you're pulling a low left, and okay, move your finger this way, and put it on the pad of your finger a little bit more, whatever it might be. Coming to Guns and Gis from minute one in the in-brief with Greg was a base. It provided a base that I can take home. Do I understand the entire even base that Greg laid out? You mean you would have had to record it. There was so much information.
Yes.
But gun control, sight control, trigger control, that my trigger has stages. I thought it had 2 stages.
Yep.
One, let out the slack on the Glock, and the other, pull the trigger.
Yeah.
I have let out the slack, and I have a 3-stage trigger. You know what I know now? When my gun's going to go off.
Yeah.
You know what I was told before? Let it surprise you. And what did Lappin make fun of on the range?
Yeah, let it surprise you.
Let it surprise you. That's the worst idea ever if you want accuracy.
Yeah.
And so it provided that base. Joel's instruction on the mat, again, my mind was flooded the first night. But I have enough to like, okay, here's the position I'm in. Here's where I don't want to be. Here's here's the grips. Here's the throws. I know that I need to break the fall on the mat. Otherwise I'm going to absorb all of that. I know where my head position should be a little bit. Okay, so that's a base that I can now go home with and learn from. And that's what was provided. And I've never had that. And I think a lot of people that get into shooting jiu-jitsu, that's their experience. And so I would say that translates though. That translates for anything. And it goes back to truth, is that you have to be around people that, like you mentioned, will tell you the truth, will tell you where you're at, or you have to be in situations that like will show you. They will clearly demonstrate of whether you're being truthful about your capability or you're not.
Yeah.
And that's the reward.
And again, that's why Lappin he'll shoot the drills first to show you the truth. hey, I do this and I'm good at it and I understand it. And he even said it, I don't ask anything of the students I'm not willing to do myself. Any drill that I ask you to do, I'll show you first. And then that's another reason why we shoot the walk back drill with you guys. It's not that we're in competition with you guys, but I want it. Everything was intentional, right? We said, hey, Chris and Toby and I can be assistant cadre guys just walking up and down the line, while Lappin really delivers the block of instructions to everybody. But at the end of the day, when you can see all of us capable of consistently hitting out to 80 yards or whatever, it solidifies that truth. Yeah. That there's a reason why Lappin is allowing us to be his assistant instructors. Yeah. And then it's also just fun to kind of immerse ourselves with the students as well, you know?
Yeah. And I think that what you provide in this weekend at your gym, what Greg provides from his instruction, what Joel provides from his instruction is it blossoms, right? So it starts with truth. It provides that base. It lets you know where you're at, where you're not at, where you have yet to go. But I've had that Glock 19 for a handful of years. That's my everyday carry. And I had no interest in getting to, I mean, it's a Glock, you know, it's pretty easy. It's the slide, it's the barrel, it's the grip, whatever. Now I want to go home. I think I told you, I'm going to learn everything about a Glock 19.
Yeah.
Where they're made, how they're made, different parts you can get, different triggers you can get, the inside workings of the gun that I carry every day. I mean, you showed me on like the magazine where there's that little depression for the eject trigger internally to the gun.
Yeah.
That fits perfect with the magazine. I've been looking at the magazine forever and I never even noticed what that was for, or truthfully noticed that it was there, but I love that it's there now and I want to learn about it. And it gets you that bug, but it was that truth. One, you got to be willing to kind of get yourself in that situation where you're exposed to the truth, because sometimes it's not going to be pretty. Sometimes it's going to be that you're doughy Dave, and you just been all words and no action. That was not a fun moment in life. But the great thing is you can put yourself in situations, and actually, like we've talked about, do you want anything to be easy? Well, anything that you like choose to do now, do you want it to be easy?
No, of course not.
No.
Anything worth having comes with a certain amount of adversity.
Yeah.
Because if it didn't, I don't think we'd want it.
Yeah. We did a Tough Mudder with a group of guys, a bunch of savages earlier this year. And it was like an 11-mile course. So you could run the 11 miles and go obstacle to obstacle. And the obstacles were great. But I was kind of like supporting some of the crew. And so I was kind of falling back. Like I wanted to like run the 11 and like push myself and stuff. Because I want that challenge. Like I don't want anything to be easy. And even though that was very rewarding, because I was kind of serving another guy in the crew that like hadn't run forever. He's like, 11 miles is a long way. I'm like, yes, it is. I'm like, when's the last time you ran? He's like, I don't really run. I'm like, oh no. So it was a long 11 miles, but that, you know, but even that, like I wanted that to be challenging because I knew that's going to be the best day possible. And I would wish that upon anyone. And what's great about, and I talked about a few guys, I won't call them out on the Forge Ferocity team, is when you first start, everything's difficult, but you start to realize you have capability. Because you took a point to be vulnerable. You took a point to be truthful with yourself. You took a point where you know you're going to fail because you don't have much capability, but then your gains are going to be massive.
Yeah.
You know, what you couldn't do before to what you're going to be able to do in a short amount of time is going to astonish you. It's when you get farther down the road that like, so I run, and then I'll stop in like October, November. I run a little bit through the winter, but then I really focus on lifting, like all those support muscles. I actually do leg day, which I normally skip with the justification that I'm running all the time.
Yeah.
Bad call. Never skip leg day. But you know, then I come back to it. And so I'm always like, I'm getting my peak times in October. And now I kind of run like this year and I'm getting back to those times. So point being, it's like when you're down that path and you're chasing tough things, eventually your gains are going to be very, very small, like almost unnoticeable, or you're going to have to get back to where you were. But when you're first starting off, I'd wish that upon anyone to just like take a chance to fail and then take a chance to just like try something difficult because you'll surprise yourself. Yes. and it snowballs.
But here's the interesting thing. We talked about it in regards to shooting. I said it on the in-brief. I said a lot of times the best shooters in the room leave the happiest. And they didn't take this giant chunk of knowledge. They took one little piece of knowledge.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing like as a runner, right? Let's say like you get off the couch and your run time is a 9:30 mile, right? and you work and you get down to an 8-minute mile. You shaved off 1.5 minutes, right?
Yeah.
Now to shave off another 1.5 minutes down to a 6:30 mile.
Yeah.
That's going to be way tougher, right?
Yeah.
But when you get to that 6:30 mile, it's going to feel so much better too.
Yep.
Or I shouldn't even say the same amount of time. Maybe half of that, you shave off another 30 seconds, but it's going to mean more.
Yeah.
Because it's pushed you that much farther down the path.
Yeah. But if you're thrown into that and you try to push yourself, whatever it is to be at that level, I mean, and that's your measuring stick, you're going to fail. But there's so much reward. And it's not, again, we established, like, if your goal is, your only measuring stick is that you have to be the best at something to do it. I mean, you're not going to have that experience. But if you just are honest and truthful with yourself, and you're really seeking about, I'm not capable, or I could be more capable. And again, capable and truth. I mean, let's like focus on those words, because you can spend days on that.
We've kind of spent years on it.
Yeah.
I just haven't articulated it with those words.
Neither of us.
But that's the truth. That is again, that's why I love you. That's why I love listening to you speak. Every time we have a Zoom meeting, I get excited to hear your perspective, because you have a way of articulating things and packaging things. It's like, oh yeah, of course, that makes perfect sense to me.
Thank you.
And I love having those moments with other people. How long do you think we've been talking right now? Just curious.
I'm not going to look at my watch or anything. Hour and 20.
Hour 56.
Wow.
Isn't that crazy?
You always say it.
I always say it.
That did not feel like 2 hours.
Yeah, it's 2 hours. But we don't have to wrap it up right away, because there's a couple things you wanted to put out, and then Jenny's going to drive us to the airport here when we wrap up. One thing that I do want to be intentional about, though, is that you talked about a charity that's important to you, that you race for, and that you wanted to talk about on the podcast. So I wanted to give you that opportunity.
Yeah. Thank you. And I appreciate it. We talked about ways to serve, and this will sound fantastic, but this is just a bunch of guys really just signing on to something, and you can serve and you can find fun ways to serve other people. But I actually do every year a 100-mile bike ride the last Saturday in August. And
so you're doing it next weekend then?
Yeah, I'm doing Saturday.
Okay.
So I need a little bit of sleep between now and then, and I'll be just fine. But we have a group that's local to our church, and then a group that's local to the Minneapolis area. And then the rides happen across the country too. But it's a mission called Fathers for the Fatherless. And what it's really about is, our international partner is a charity called Venture. And so when you donate money towards them, it goes towards Venture. And what they focus on is serving the underserved populations in the world. And what I'm talking about is not the, well-known cities or metropolitan areas where there's need. This is people who really have not seen anybody ever help them in lives. And specifically, our mission serves Myanmar, so the Burma area, and Thailand. They've had a border civil war going on that's the longest standing civil war in human history.
Wow.
Did you ever hear that?
No, I did not know that.
Yeah, no one hears about it. And unfortunately, no one hears about it. And so they're underserved population. And what happens in that scenario is like the war we do hear about, the Ukraine, where the men go to fight in the wars and they're killed, and children are orphaned and women are widowed. And when you're the poor of the poor, and many of the class systems that these people exist in, they actually have a name for it, and I forgot the name of it, but it means unclean. They're not even viewed in their society as people who can raise themselves up. So it's like, oh, well, go get a job and raise yourself up. I mean, that's not even on the board for them. And through the mission, we raise money to get food to them, and to provide not even necessarily that we do provide a Christian message to them, and a message of hope, and a message of, like we spoke about, addressing with assigning value to them, and addressing them with value, and rising them up into in a surrounding where they otherwise wouldn't be. I can share one story of where the money went previous years. Is one of the villages that got some of the funds got a cement mixer, and they were able to make cinder blocks. And we watch the video because we always I only participate in like charities that I know where the money's going and I trust, because there's a lot out there.
A lot of
You hear,
scams,
and, yeah,
of course.
even in the military environment, there's one that are questionable. We're watching the video, and they get the cement mixer, and the kids are dancing around it with the biggest smiles that you can imagine, and the women in the village are sitting around it with the biggest smiles that you can imagine. And you're like, it's a cement mixer. Well, they're making cinder blocks, and they're making cinder blocks so they can build more permanent structures in their village, so that it's not as easy for the women and children to be snatched at night while they sleep.
Wow.
And they're celebrating a cement mixer, and it puts into perspective of where we're at. And it just reminds me, as I serve that mission, that no matter how bad today is, I got pretty damn good. And I think that more people need to kind of like even put their lives into that perspective of like, hey, I got some things to do, and we talked about things to do today. So that's our international partner, and that's why we're riding. That's why we put in the miles. And it's, so fathers who are fatherless. Again, I've had the blessing to have a father. I've had the blessing to be a father to two amazing young men, and God placed in my heart. So that's been amazing. And then one thing I mentioned you to as well, our local partner. And this is the one, I'm gonna try to stay dry-eyed here. My buddy Andy Vogie, shout out. He started a local mission called Legacy to Inspire. And Legacy to Inspire, what they do is they just got like a trailer to pull behind a big Ford F-350, and they load it up with a bunch of benches and saws, and they bring the trades to schools in our area of, again, underserved youth. And stories of these youth are, dad was gone, dad beat him, mother beat him, both were drunks. I mean, it runs the gamut, but what the core is kids that were never assigned value. No one ever told them they were worth anything. And so the mission gets them out, and they do these like very, very basic, like wood crafting. They built a vegetable cart to take this to the senior center to be able to put like fruit and vegetables in, so that the seniors could be, and they delivered it to them. And so that you have these youth interacting with the seniors in the community. And I mean, that's one story, and there's literally hundreds of lives that have been impacted. And these kids are staying in school, and they're finding value, or they're going to trade schools, or they're getting their GED, because one guy decided to say, you know what, we need to inspire these kids, and I have the skills to do that.
And he's going to take the time and energy to pour into them and teach them something.
That's right.
Wow, man. Do me a favor when text me the links to both of those organizations, and I'll put them in the show notes, because you know how the show works. There's someone somewhere listening that's like, oh, that's interesting to me.
100%.
And they may want to connect or donate or whatever it may be.
Thank you.
One thing that I'll say too, that I got a lot of pushback from when I went to Mexico with Angie's dad and built homes for homeless people. They're like, why are you dedicating time and money to people in Mexico? Mm-hmm. We have people in America that need stuff. And you're right.
Yeah,
we do.
Yeah.
And don't get me wrong, I'm proud of being an American. I like being a part of this country, and it's like all the things, right? Yeah. Okay, I get it. But don't assign value to a human being based on what patch of dirt they were born on.
Exactly, right.
Because we're all in it together, and we're all the same, man.
Yeah.
And there's shitty people on every place, but there's also good people in every place.
Yeah. And
if you have the capacity to pour into those people, never diminish that or act like that's a problem or that's not something to be celebrated. And also the truth is, and you'll know this to be true, it's like those people in Miramar, you can give them a cement mixer and now they can build a home. You try and do that here, you're going to have red tape and you didn't get a permit and this and that, and something went wrong and now you're getting sued. And it's like, that's just the reality of planet Earth. Sometimes everything is logistically more possible to help people over there instead of over here. At the end of the day, who cares? Because they're people and they are over there instead of over here. Does that assign a different value to them? No.
I love, and you've talked about that too, even going into battle, with men with conflicting views, the courage that it takes, wherever it's coming from, is the same. And, I would say a couple of things. One, yeah, the dollar goes a lot farther. I mean, a dollar literally provides a meal in that scenario to a kid, so they don't have to eat rocks to trick their stomach to think that they're full, because that's what they're doing.
Jeez.
So you put that in perspective. And what I tell that person that says, "Oh, you go to Mexico, why don't you help here?" I go, "Okay, what are you doing here yourself?"
That's right.
And if they came back with maybe they're helping a mission here, you know what I'd say? "All right, when can I come help you?"
That's right. Yeah.
Just turn back on them.
Yep.
Most of those people, they're not taking action. They're words. They're not action.
Yeah.
And I think that you and I get that. And I think we vibe. And that's why, you've been a great example. So I thank you for letting me get that message out. And I think that's a good place to end, as far as Legacy to Inspire. But if anyone wants to know more about that mission, I'll get you the link and go read it and go read about the individuals that are involved in it.
Okay.
And what they're doing. It's literally a trailer right now, and it's a pickup. And I think they got some plans to grow. They got some challenges to get around with the business right now. And it's a lot. Some of it's the red tape, and some of it's just life happening right now.
Of course.
For those involved.
Are you comfortable with me putting your Instagram in the show notes as well? So
Yeah.
if anyone wants to reach out to you with additional questions directly.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. What I wanted to get out. We always talk about being intentional in Forge Ferocity, and you and I just talking about being intentional as human beings, is that, I hope that what people heard is that, I was going down the same path that many people are going down, and there's nothing necessarily at the time that would distinguish me or make me more capable of not being susceptible to that. But I took some right steps, and that kind of showed me a path to take the next steps. And it's very empowering. And when you snatch your life back from the fire, like when quotes like that really hit you, because you're like, yeah, I wasn't a UFC fighter in the 5th round, but God, it felt exactly right. It like that.
Yeah.
You move with that, and then you see that you want that for other people. So I would say that if anybody wants to reach out and they're wondering like what's next, I would love to help. I that's where I'm at right now. That's chapter that, book 2 or whatever of 48 and on now, is that I have to get in scenarios where I'm helping people and where I'm serving people, because that's what God has for me in life. And that's where I just need to be as a human being. Cause I don't want people to get to, 40 some years old before they try to get on that path. And we got guys in the Forge Ferocity group that are in their 30s and figuring it out. And there was literally teenagers at Guns and Gis, and to see that is so, like, it just fires me up, because
wasn't
it's like,
that great,
oh,
man. Wasn't that great?
Yeah. And last thing with Lappin, he shared a little bit. He wished he would have smiled more as a kid. And one thing I told him, because he's Mr. Serious, and some people might look at him in his videos and think, yeah, that fits. But one, amazing dude. But what I would say to him is that because of what he's doing right now, he brought smiles to the faces of so many people this weekend, and he changed lives this weekend. And I think that that's like what we get sometimes. Like I didn't do it right in my 30s and 40s, but I can change people's lives, and I can help them do what they should be doing in their 30s and 40s now. And when that comes off, and when that is received by people, and that starts happening, that's all I want right now.
Yeah.
In life, is to be that component. And I don't need the glory. I don't want it at all. That's one thing about serving, that you really, if you understand it, like, you provide it, you serve. Like, it is not for your glory. You provide the space, and you kind of let God come into that and work on people, or you come into that space and you allow them to better themselves and find that reward from themselves, but you create that space. And I'm going to find a way to do that more because right now that's my hobby or my side job, but that's got to be my main job.
That's going to be the new mission, huh?
Yeah.
I love it, man. And the truth of this is, I don't know if I know a better person suited for that. And then that's again, like, if you see how many times the word truth was used in this episode, we probably set a record, but that's the truth. You're a powerful human being. You're a loving human being. You love pushing the message of having a strong moral compass and making good choices and leveling up and changing for the better. And that's what we're about here. And that's why I felt connected to you very, very early on when we started talking. And any way I can support that message, because there are so many things that our society is struggling with and that we are failing in, and the darkness and the division and the hate and the politics. And as Andy Frisella always says, personal excellence is the ultimate rebellion. That's the way we get out of it. And if we can share that message, spread that message, get people on board, empower people, you and I already know that's the way out of it.
Yeah.
You know, it's not by a revolution with weapons and storming the Capitol and taking it over. Like, will that day happen someday? Probably, right? Let's just be honest. Beings are going to do what human beings do. But with where we're at right now and what we can provide, this is the answer right now.
Yeah.
And we both know it. And you're leaning into it. And I love seeing it, man. Because imagine if more people leaned into that.
Yeah.
The more people that can raise up the people to their left and their right and make them become people that they're proud of. That's what's going to make humanity as a whole unstoppable.
That's right.
And I don't think that that's off the table. I don't think that's an unreasonable expectation to set for humanity. We can do it.
Yeah.
We just have to get enough people on board to say we can. And once you step into that realm and you start doing it, it does build momentum and it does become contagious, because there is someone right now who is probably depressed, overweight, doesn't like who they are. You're going to impact their life for the better, and then they're going to do the same thing. And that ripple effect is real, man.
Yeah.
So I appreciate you taking the time to come up this morning. I know we had a really busy weekend and we're both tired, but life goes on and we had an opportunity and we seized it. And I appreciate you coming up and doing this show. But we got to get going to the airport pretty quick. Is there anything else on your mind or on your heart that you wanted to put out before we wrap it up?
Yeah, no, I mean, just honestly, it's been a real privilege. I feel really honored that you asked. I hear the people in the stories that are on your podcast, and when you first asked me, I don't think I said yes right away, as I didn't know if what would I say? And there's actually a guy in my men's coffee group. His name's Steve, so shout out to Steve. He's one of the elders of our group, and he says something. And he says everybody's got a story, and everybody deserves to hear their story heard. And that gets played around with, like with woke culture and stuff, but at the base of that is a lot of truth again.
Yes.
And thank you for letting me share mine. And I love seeing yours. And I think that's why we vibe, because it's a lot of overlap, because it's all based in
100%.
truth and it's all based in capability. And I love you for that. And I really look forward to where our friendship's going, and the friendships that now I have, because you decided to get some group that we still don't know what it does. Called Forge Ferocity.
we don't really know we don't know what the future holds.
Yeah.
But what we do know is it's impacting people and it's meaningful. And so we're going to keep going.
Yeah. So thank you for all that. That's all I got. And again, very much honored to be on.
So we'll do it again for sure at some point. I don't know when or what that looks like, but I value the value that you bring. And there's no doubt that we'll be doing more of this in the future.
Awesome. Thank you.